The Cold War, which grew out of the post-World War II rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, was a war of words, not bombs and bullets. From 1945 to 1991, America's government communicated the anti-Soviet message through propaganda in the forms of television, films, radio, and literature. This propaganda influenced people's understanding and misunderstanding of the Soviets, both domestically and abroad.
Dad, tell me the truth, will you? Are you a Red or not?
Believe me, you communists can't keep fooling the entire world. You can't even keep fooling your own people. Because the news about communism is getting around. But it's only another word for slavery.
Though propaganda often has a negative connotation to it, literally it can be truthful. Propaganda is defined in Webster's dictionary as, quote, ideas, facts, or allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause or to damage an opposing cause, unquote. President Eisenhower established the United States Information Agency in 1953 to deal with propaganda, or public diplomacy.
Well, propaganda is a way of bringing the story that one wants to present to a group of people, which will have an effect on their political lives.
Domestic propaganda became an important part of American culture during the period of time from 1948 to the mid-1950s, known as the McCarthy era. In February 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy said in a famous speech, quote, "The State Department, which is one of the most important government departments, is thoroughly infested with communists," unquote.
Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
This speech came at the height of the arms race, when America's fear of the Soviet Union was strong and came to be known as the Red Scare.
If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist. But there are other communists who don't show their real faces, who work more silently.
But this put a tremendous, created tremendous turmoil in the American government, because everyone felt that he might be under suspicion, and there were a lot of innocent people, I'm sure, whose reputations were blackened by these charges. Now, it needs to be said that there were a few people who were uncovered really as Soviet agents, but there were only a handful of these people, and there were masses and masses of people who were under a cloud who were completely innocent. And if anything, the Red Scare, the things that Senator McCarthy did were a setback for the cause of anti-communism, because they created, they weakened our capability to deal with the Soviet Union.
The atmosphere at the time was rich in fear and paranoia. Propaganda reflected and ignited these feelings with exaggeration. As a result, the American public misunderstood what was really happening during the Red Scare. At the time, the fear of nuclear war with the Soviets was also widespread. Fallout shelters and civil defense drills became common, including the famous propaganda newsreel, Duck and Cover.
Sundays, holidays, vacation time, we must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes. Duck and cover. This family knows what to do, just as your own family should. They know that even a thin cloth helps protect them. Even a newspaper can save you from a bad burn. But the most important thing of all is to duck and cover yourself, especially where your clothes do not cover you.
Television and films had many propagandistic roles in American culture at home.
They are lying. dirty, shrewd, godless, murderous, determined.
Films would portray the evils of communism, or what life would be like if America was taken over by the communists. Some, like the James Bond movies, just showed Russia as the enemy. The United States government, especially the Department of Defense, became actively involved in Hollywood, both producing films as well as suppressing ones that portrayed America unattractively. The film Red Nightmare was about a small town taken over by communists.
You've got no right to be in this house. I'm going to give you just 10 seconds to get out of here.
Daddy? It's true, Daddy. I did volunteer for farm work.
Linda, why?
The party convinced me that I should free myself of the lingering bourgeois influence of family life. I am ready.
Propaganda could also be seen in comics, posters, pamphlets, magazines, and books. The comic book Is This Tomorrow imagines what life would be like in a communist America. But at the height of the Cold War, the most useful way for the American government to get its message out was not film or even the new medium of television, but rather radio. Radio Free Europe was established in 1949 to broadcast to the countries behind the so-called Iron Curtain, and was secretly funded by the CIA, unlike the Voice of America, another radio organization that was openly funded by the United States Information Agency. Its counterpart, Radio Liberty, aimed inside the Soviet Union itself, was founded in 1951. Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty broadcasted news and information to people in Europe, Russia, Asia, and the Middle East that they could not have otherwise hear because of their oppressive governments.
This theater brings you an important message from
Bing Crosby. I want to tell you something I found out over in Europe. We've got plenty of good friends behind the Iron Curtain, probably 50 or 60 million of them. Naturally, they're not Russians, they're not communists. They're freedom-loving peoples in the captive countries who refuse to believe the big red lies the commies tell them. And you know why they don't believe those lies? It's because we, yes, you and I, and millions of other private U.S. citizens have found a way to pierce the Iron Curtain with the truth. And that way is Radio Free Europe, the most powerful weapon in the crusade for freedom.
I would say the main message was to try to be a surrogate radio station because news was very heavily censored in the countries they were broadcasting to. They tried to provide a surrogate, a substitute for the radio station that you could have set up in one of those countries if you'd been free to do it. So they tried to reflect the concerns, the domestic concerns of their audiences. Of course, they also carried international news too, but unlike the Voice of America, they dealt much more extensively with the domestic concerns of these countries and much less with the United States.
Those people who were there during the Cold War are proud that their message may really have made a difference in turning the course of history.
I believe that this story of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty is one of the great untold stories, because I think it really was effective in the long run. And look, the Radio Free Europe began in 1950 broadcasting, and it continued right down until 1989 and much later. And 1989, of course, was the year that the wall in Berlin fell and that the Soviet Union collapsed. And so all during this period, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty were broadcasting. And I think it can't help to have had a great effect on the people's lives, giving them hope that they would someday be rejoined with the Western European community and the free world.
Dum dum, diddle dum dum, diddle dum dum, diddle dum dum. There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered, ducked and covered. He did what we all must learn to do. You and you and you.